Hi, everybody. This is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with crypto profits. I'm delighted once again to have with me my favorite political commentators, Tom Luongo of the Duran. And
yeah, I'm not the Duran.
oh,
Just merge us into one person.
Sorry.
Merge the Greek and the Italian into one guy.
That's right. The quality of analysis becomes one. So I'm delighted to have with me two of my favorite political commentators. I've learned loads from both of them. They are Alexander Mercouris of the Duran channel and Tom Luongo of tomluongo.me and Gold Goats and Guns channel. And I'll have links to their channels in the description below. And please go and check them out and find out for yourself. Now, before I introduce them, please subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, click the notification bell so that you're getting all the notifications. Like and comment, that all helps. Part of this video, in fact, a fair chunk of this video is not going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on my BitTube channel. I have the link in the description below. It'll also be on my library channel. And so I would recommend you go and subscribe to BitTube and you subscribe to library. And that's because of all the censorship that's going on with the big tech giants.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
All right, good afternoon and good morning to you, Tom, and good afternoon, Alexander. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. And I think we spoke about 6 weeks ago about an entire playlist where we're seeing how themes are developing in the political sphere. And today we're going to be talking about Brexit. We're going to be talking about Russiagate or Obamagate. We're going to be talking about, apparently there's an election going on in one of the Western nations, I hear, right? And that's going to take up a fair amount of the time. We're going to be talking about freedom of expression and also how this all ties in is going to pan out into the future with regards to a possible monetary reset as governments keep printing away fiat money. Let's start with Brexit.
Good morning. Good morning, guys. It's great to be here. I am almost properly caffeinated, so I hope I'm coherent. I literally just woke up. But Alex, give us the latest stuff on Brexit, man. I'm encouraged, but at the same time, there's always the opportunity for things to go badly.
There's always the possibility of things going badly and of big things being derailed, and nothing. This won't be done until it's done, and I think that's an absolutely critical thing to stress. But we've had this extraordinary game for most of this year of the European Union doing what it always does. It pretends to negotiate about free trade deals and all the rest, when in reality it doesn't. And you also get the usual clack of people in Britain and the UK who support the EU in these games. They basically say, we've got to make all the concessions, we've got to move, we need to do it because our economy depends on it. The future of thousands of jobs allegedly is at risk unless we basically agree to whatever they say. And the interesting thing is that so far and for the moment, Boris Johnson himself is standing firm. Now, I think a lot of people expected that he would buckle. He's not a person who is widely seen as very reliable on the things that he says that he will do. But at the moment, he is standing firm. And we had a, frankly, rather farcical event recently in which we reached a European Council meeting. Now, European Council meetings, to those of our viewers who don't know, are supposed to be the meetings of the heads of state and government of the European Union. It's where the major decisions are supposed to supposedly be made. They used to be called EU summit meetings, and then when all the changes to all the treaties were made, they became enshrined in EU law, and it's now, if you like, the Central Committee of the European Union, because that's essentially how it works. It's the Central Committee.
Proper Politburo fashion.
Proper Politburo. Well, within the Central Committee has a Politburo, and there is a Politburo, and that Politburo consists of Angela Merkel, sometimes Monsieur Macron, though he's not always necessarily a member, Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde, and one or two other people of that nature.
Right.
So anyway, the Central Committee, the European Council met. That was supposed to be the point where it was going to, rubber stamp the free trade deal. It didn't happen. Ursula von der Leyen came along and said, well, it's not a problem because we're going to continue with the negotiations, despite the fact that we haven't yet agreed anything. And, one shouldn't worry. And she gave people the expectation that there might be an extension of the deadline for a deal, which is supposed to run out at the end of this year. And then Boris Johnson came along, and I think he was actually rattled by what Ursula von der Leyen was saying, and he decided that he had to come out and say very clearly that, in fact, there's not been any kind of agreed extension. Yes, we are talking, and we will continue talking right up until the last moment, but ultimately, if there isn't a deal done within the deadline, which Parliament itself has now set, then we will have a no-deal situation, at which point Britain trades with the EU on World Trade Organization lines, like Australia does. And, of course, all the usual people then came along and said this would be a disaster, this would be awful, there would be, the economy would melt down, as if the economy wasn't already in serious trouble. But anyway, that's another story. But, the economy would melt down, and there was talk of, Tory MPs, Conservative MPs rebelling. There's been divisions in the cabinet. Rishi Sunak, who's an individual we're going to talk about, I think, because he's quite an interesting man. I learned a lot about him over the last couple of days, by the way. He's now sort of manoeuvring to be the person who wants to extend the deadlines. He clearly wants to become the next Prime Minister and Conservative leader. So he's reaching out to the Remainer establishment. And all of that's going on. But at the moment, the impression I get is that Johnson himself is going to stand firm, and he is going to continue to stand firm. That's my own opinion, because I think he understands, if very few other people seem to do, that ultimately his political future rests on this. He has got to get Brexit done by the time that he says. Now, Johnson may not be a man of high principle. He may not be a man of great consistency. He may be somebody who's very flexible in his beliefs and his opinions, but he very, very much wants to remain Prime Minister. And I think he realizes that if he starts being flexible on deadlines, then frankly, politically, he's toast. He will start to fall in exactly the way that David Cameron and Theresa May did. So that's why I think it is going to happen. But we can't be absolutely sure. Possibilities of an internal coup within the Conservative Party are very real.
Yep.
They will not be dressed up as being about Brexit. They will be about other things, about COVID, about all kinds of things like that. But that will probably be the agenda. And you will hear all the rumbles. We'll hear the rumbles from the business people in the city who want to see Brexit stopped. We'll hear the Conservative MPs rumbling. We'll be seeing the leaks from the civil servants that, nothing's been prepared, and we will go down in chaos and flames. The Bank of England may no doubt weigh in. And, of course, we'll have the spectre of Scotland seceding looming on the horizon also. So all of that will be going on between now and the next couple of weeks. But overall, and by and large, I think Johnson will remain Prime Minister, and I think he understands that Brexit will have to be done. And we will see what happens. We will see whether he does stand firm, whether that deadline remains firm, and whether or not, if it does remain firm, he's pushed into some kind of catastrophic capitulation on the trade negotiations. But we will see. I don't think so myself, but with Johnson, you can never be completely sure.
And to add some color to that, which is fantastic, Alexander. My thesis has been for 6 months now that Johnson can only stand firm as long as Donald Trump remains president of the United States, right? Because it is the possibility of an easy or relatively easy free trade, because no negotiation with Trump is easy, but a relatively easy negotiation on a free trade deal with the United States, which then gives Johnson the leverage he needs to just stand back and go, look, I got a better deal from the U.S. and they're more important than you are. At least their economy isn't dead. You guys have decided to strangle your economy because you have bigger plans that are coming in the future, which you feel it necessary to lock down your people because you're so worried about civil unrest and the potential civil unrest for when you close the banks and abrogate the debt and all the things that we're going to talk about when we get to the Great Reset and later. But this has everything to do what you're seeing from people like Merkel and Macron and even in Spain, the Netherlands, and to a lesser extent, I believe this is the case in the UK as well, that these lockdowns are politically motivated because they know that there is chaos coming and they need now, has nothing to do with public health. It has everything to do with political unrest. It has everything to do with but they're all doing it for slightly different reasons. And I do believe that Boris Johnson, who in my mind they tried to kill him at least twice, and there's been at least 3 or 4 attempts to physically stop Brexit. And while we were all fascinated by the color revolutionary tactics that were happening in the United States and places like Portland and Minneapolis with Black Bloc Antifa and BLM and all the rest of it, all of that was designed, it's all color revolution stuff to set the stage for how they're going to resist Trump's win, because I'm firmly convinced he's going to win in 2 weeks, to overturn the election, like we've seen so many times in Belarus now, or Kyrgyzstan is happening. The president of Kyrgyzstan just resigned. Yada yada. Armenia, we can go. Egypt, blah blah blah. But we were all distracted with that and identifying that. The same thing was happening in London. I mean, I saw statues. I saw plenty of video of statues being toppled by the idea of Antifa. Not reality. The idea of Antifa was out there toppling the statues and in the north of England, they were rioting in London, and the same thing was going on. So there was that pressure was coming. And for how many weeks did Nigel Farage stand up there on his bully pulpit going, "Boris, get this under control"? And he's right, but at the same time, this is far bigger than that. And I think there was, I love Nigel, but I think he was a little tone deaf with how he's handled Boris throughout all of this summer, because it's very obvious that the goal of all of this was to weaken Johnson's support after a historic electoral victory in December. And now you've seen the polls shift a full 19 points away from him. Right? The polls are now, well, I've seen, Labor and the Conservatives are in a dead heat. So if they can, manufacture any kind of dissent within the Tories and force a general election again, then maybe get that done before the end of the year. And I think that Johnson's lockdown policy is purely about civil unrest, because they're going to try and create an opportunity for a coup and an opportunity for a massive uprising about Brexit. They're going to activate all these people. And by doing it this way, you've actually activated security services in certain ways. I don't know British law and British law enforcement rules, but I know that here in the U.S., what stopped the rioting in places like Portland was Trump going in and deputizing the Oregon State Police by neatly bypassing the federal portion of the state governments and the governors, the DAs, and the state attorney's offices, who were refused to prosecute these people. Who were just, if the police rounded them up, they were letting them back in the streets. And the minute he deputized the state police, made them federal marshals, now all of these were federal crimes, and I'm sorry, you get remanded to Guantanamo. That's it. We're done. And then all the leaders of this stuff have been rounded up, which is why the siege of the White House, the 50-day siege, that got canceled. So this is all very important. It's all tied to Brexit, because Brexit is an existential threat to the European Union. And so I don't know that I'm right about this theory, but I keep watching it because it just doesn't seem right. Either that, or it is, as Martin Armstrong has been suggesting for weeks now, that Boris has been paid off and at the last minute he's going to betray Brexit. Yeah. I think that's probably not the right read. I don't see that. I think your read, Alex, that he would like to remain prime minister for more than a year is his primary motivation, and he knows that he has to get Brexit done. And he also knows that he has to get away from the EU if, in any way, manner, shape, or form, the United Kingdom is going to survive as a political unit. Because the Internal Market Bill was a statement that we are not going to cleave off Northern Ireland, and hey, you're not going to cleave off, and then don't get any ideas about Scotland. And you and I talked about this previously, yes, about how, by the Internal Markets Bill defends the United Kingdom in a way that makes it unassailable. So I find it humorous that we're all, oh, well, the door's still open. We can still negotiate. They haven't settled the Northern Ireland Protocol. They haven't settled on the Internal Markets Bill. They haven't settled on the European Court of Justice. They haven't settled on fisheries. They haven't settled on anything. But, we can come up with a deal in 4 days.
Yeah. I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say too quickly, when you say they haven't settled, I mean, the demands the European Union is actually making remain incredible. I mean, the demands on fisheries, which is, admittedly, it's an important issue for many people symbolically. I mean, Britain doesn't have the great fishing fleets. When once upon a time, I remember, in my lifetime, fishing was an important part of was an important livelihood for many people in Britain, and there was a whole culture around the fishing industries and the fishing fleets and trawlers and all that. That's to a great extent gone. But it's still symbolically important that they want basically unrestricted access to British fisheries by, well, they say French, but they mean European, but but whatever, in a way that completely disregards British sovereignty over Britain's own waters. It's quite a bizarre demand, actually. Extraordinary demand. There's just another thing I quickly wanted to say about the opinion polls. The most remarkable thing about the opinion polls is Labour has seen a big rise. I mean, it's gone up from a 32 point whatever it was %, which is what we got in the election. It's gone up to 40%. The interesting thing, though, is that has come overwhelmingly at the expense of centrist parties. Mm-hmm. Like the Liberal Democrats, people of that kind, who've seen their sort of vote levels fall. The Conservative vote has up to now, despite all the problems, despite the recession, despite the pandemic, despite the media criticism, despite the rumblings within the Conservative Party itself, it's remained remarkably solid. It was just under 44% at the time of the election. It's now polling at around 40% now. Mm-hmm. That is not all considered a big drop. Now, why have they not dropped more? I think it is because a lot of their voters are remaining loyal to them because they want them to get Brexit done.
Yep.
If Brexit is not done, those voters will go. And I think that the thing that also keeps Johnson there is that within the Conservative Party, there is now a phalanx of Conservative MPs elected in former Red Wall seats. Red Wall seats are very pro-Brexit, who understand this and who support the policy of seeing Brexit done. So he does have a core of support within the Conservative Party, both these MPs who were elected to these seats and who worry that if there's a switch in policy, they will lose out. They will lose out probably not to the Labour Party, but to whatever new version of the Brexit Party, the UKIP or whatever, Farage comes up. And there is also, of course, the traditional libertarian, right, anti-European wing of the party, Conservative Party, which has always been there too. So I think Johnson still has that support, but it is conditional. And I think the Conservative Party still has a surprising amount of support in the country, but that also is conditional. It is conditional on getting Brexit done. If Brexit is done, then I think the Conservatives will continue to get a lot of goodwill from seeing it done from those same voters. And I think those voters, by and large, will accept an economic knock if that's the price of it, because they're very clear that that's what they want to see happen. If we start to see slippage, either in deadlines or in agreeing to these extraordinary demands the EU is making, then it becomes a completely different story. And then we could start to see probably not the Labour vote rising. I think 40% is about its upper limit now. at the moment, certainly with Keir Starmer. In fact,
Sure.
I would think it more. I think it's quite possible we could see this Labour coalition, which is very unstable and uneasy. We could see it start to fall again, but we could also see the Conservative vote falling rapidly in its own in many of these sorts of constituencies.
Right.
So that's the situation politically.
Yeah, and I heard watching some stuff recently that we saw a small bump in the Brexit Party polls, and one of the polls recently from a Kantar poll had him back up at 5%, which is one of those moments where the minute Johnson started to talk about delaying off of one of his red lines, boom, everybody started. The Brexit Party went from 1% to 5%. There you go. There's your indicator. Not saying they're going to win anything, saying that it's a very, very tenuous level of support that everybody has.
Yes.
And when you're saying during that, one of the things that reminded me of this, and I'm starting to lose it, now I have to get back to it again. Sorry, not enough coffee yet this morning. What I thought, it's about Macron and fisheries. I honestly think that I wrote an article a year ago, right at the end of the year, right as Brexit was happening, the official Brexit. I think it was published on the 29th of December. I said, and I asked the question as to whether or not Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron engineered a no-deal Brexit when they agreed back in October to the withdrawal agreement with all of its little stipulations. Macron, as you've pointed out many times on the Duran, Alex, Macron wants nothing to do with the Brits. If European integration is predicated on, it's conditional on the Brits leaving, let them leave.
Yes.
Because he then uses that as a cudgel to undermine the power of Angela Merkel and Germany within the European Union. He becomes the king of Europe.
Yes.
Germany is brought low. France is ascendant. They're playing king of the ant pile, right? And the foot's coming to wipe the ant pile out and pour gasoline on it and let it slide it on fire. Doesn't matter. I'm in charge, right? You're the king of the ant pile. Who cares? But that's what I think is happening in terms of the internal divisions within the European Union, and Macron making this unbelievable stance of no, you must give us unrestrained access to your fishing waters. Me personally, I don't believe a word of that.
No.
To me, that screams, I want the UK out of my union. Go away.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that is exactly what it's all about. I think it's a wrecking tactic. He is making a demand he knows the British can never agree to. Right. And at the same time, he's holding the negotiations hostage to it. Yes. Obviously, it plays well.
And at the same time, he wins over the French constituency because he's fighting for France. All the French workers with yellow vests, right? He's fighting for France and for our fishing industry.
Exactly. No, he's fighting the French middle class who he has serious problems with. No, Rich, thank you for bringing that point up. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
All of that, it makes sense. And then on top of all of that, you have the Merkel angle.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Merkel will be gone in a year. Yes. And Merkel just stepped in it badly over Alexei Navalny and Nord Stream 2.
Yes.
And forced the EU into making a decision that they didn't want to make by countenancing this stupid story, because she can't take number two or go blind, as we say here in the United States. That between the United States and Russia, she doesn't want to alienate Russia. She doesn't want to alienate Donald Trump, who's putting unbelievable pressure on her. Why? To break NATO, to break the European Union, to break Germany's holdover policy, to put Erdogan back in his place over in Turkey, and all of this stuff. And all she's done is now alienated both of them. Yeah. Because now Putin is done with her. Because a year and a half ago, they were doing a garden party photo shoot after Putin visited the wedding of the Austrian finance minister or foreign minister. Remember that? And then right after that, he visited Merkel, and they had that garden party moment where they're having tea and chatting about things, and it was supposed to be like, this is the new, and then that has now dissipated. Putin won't even take her phone call right now.
No, exactly.
Over election development.
He won't. He has refused.
And Macron knows. He knows all of this and knows exactly how to take her down. And the Germans are the ones who are most willing to make a deal and compromise on everything in order to protect what's left of their industry.
I agree. I completely agree.
I imagine that the British negotiators will have some idea about these machinations going on. Plus, also, Boris Johnson, I'm no fan of his for all his faults. In terms of the trajectory of his political career, he's played it well. He has played it really, really well, going from Mayor of London, replacing a very popular mayor in Ken Livingstone, and then running for 2 terms as Mayor of London, then getting into the Tory party, and then eventually the Prime Minister. So from that, I read that strategically he's pretty sharp.
Mm-hmm. He is.
So that's,
he is an extremely skillful politician. He's also, and I know this because I knew this from the time when he was Mayor of London, a very poor manager.
yes,
He's this very strange combination, which, I mean, he gets bored by that kind of thing. And at the same time, because of the nature of the Conservative Party at the moment, he's not got the sort of technocrats around him that other Conservative prime ministers, who are also not particularly good administrators in the past, have historically had. So we have a government that is perhaps not got much grip on the administrative side. But British politics over the last 30 years is littered with the corpses of people who underestimated Boris Johnson. Mm-hmm. You've got Theresa May, you've got, you've got Ken Livingstone, as you said, you've got Ken Livingstone. David Cameron, George Osborne, David,
Sir Mark Sedwill.
Sir Mark Sedwill, exactly. So, I mean, he is a very tactically astute politician, and actually a very ruthless one. This is a side of it that, a side of him that isn't, I think, fully appreciated. So you have this combination of a person who's got those skills, but is bored by administration, and at the same time, who is uneasy about his control of his own party. And that's always an interesting combination. But I think that he will come through, precisely because there is no one else in British politics who has that level of political skill.
Yeah. Now, there is Rishi.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak.
Let's talk.
I don't know much about, but he's just a blow-in in the way that Obama was a blow-in, and he is ex-Goldman Sachs.
Yes, he is. He is also apparently the son-in-law of somebody of a person who I was told very recently is perhaps the 10th richest man in the world. So he's got big money behind him. He went to Winchester, which is one of the big public schools. That's very confusing for Americans. A public school in Britain is a very exclusive private school, in fact, the most exclusive private schools, and Winchester is amongst that ring of exclusive private schools, one of the most expensive and exclusive. So he is absolutely part of the establishment in that respect. But he's also connected to international wealth, and he's connected very, very much to the globalist elite. The question is, how has he risen in a cabinet led by someone like Johnson, who to some extent is trying to take Britain away from that kind of style of politics and that kind of, if you like, engagement with the general financial world? Well, I've heard many explanations. One of them is that, Johnson's own wife supposedly knows Sunak and has been supporting him in some kind of a way. I'm a bit sceptical about that because, as I said, Johnson is such a ruthless character that I can't imagine that he would let those kind of sentimental issues influence him. I think, bluntly, that there's been a trade-off. I think in order to get rid of people like Sedwill and people like Javid, who are more of a threat to Johnson a few months ago, he had to agree to bring in Sunak. I think that Sunak is openly disloyal to him and is clearly working against Johnson within the cabinet. And I think that this is perhaps the key, is now the focus of the danger to Johnson. We're going to discuss Sunak's policies, no doubt, and you've got probably much more to say about them than I do when we discuss the economic issues on this program. But it seems to me that he is following exactly the same playbook as all the other finance ministers and bankers and central bankers that there are around. So he's clearly a danger to Johnson, and it'd be very, very interesting to see how that shapes out. If there is going to be a coup against Johnson within the Conservative Party and within the cabinet, it will come from Sunak. And if you read the media, if you read parts of the media, it's been really interesting to see how from the moment that Sunak became Chancellor, there has been a sustained media campaign to build him up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's no coincidence.
Oh, of course not. I mean, it's always a good sign. It's like, again, if you talk about the Soviet Union, you could always tell who was up by, if Pravda was publishing glowing articles about, Mr. Kuznetsov, then you knew that Mr. Kuznetsov was the rising man.
Same thing with the New York Times and the Washington Post here in the United States.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. The intelligence agencies have decided, who's next.
That's very good, because we're going to come to this when we talk about censorship, because the mainstream media is different departments of Pravda, more and more increasingly.
Okay.
Tom, anything you want to say about Brexit before we move on?
Other than the fact that, like I said, just to remind everybody that all of this maneuvering is in preparation for the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, right? Yeah. That this is all tied into that, and they haven't made their peace yet, I don't think. With this idea, and they're still hoping that they can figure out a way to scuttle this and bring Brexit back into the fold. Because again, what they're planning for us, and we'll get into more detail later. What they're planning for us only works if the European Union is ascendant as the dominant Western power.
Yes.
So now let's talk about Russiagate.
Yeah.
Because Russiagate is a direct attack against the core American power centers, right? Which is the presidency. All right. So,
okay. All right. So, Tom, where are we at with regards to Russiagate? How do you read it?
Everything's in stasis before the election. The entire world. I like watching the markets. We do this. So if I glance away from the screen, because I've got my portfolio of assets that I cross markets that I'm watching constantly.